This question to kick off with, Pasha on email asks, after his Tottenham sacking, you know what's coming, might Thomas Frank's next move be to a club on the European continent? Why don't you go with that first, Lars?
It depends on him a little bit, because I think the nature... Do you think Spurs have become one of those clubs where there's so much other stuff at the club that's not going right that if the manager fails, it's not a total reputation killer? I think he comes out of that job with a lot of people feeling sympathy for the fact that he was only over there for slightly over half a year, for the fact that it's a club in transition with Daniel Levy leaving. There are question marks about the people running the club. I don't think it would be very difficult for him to walk into a job interview and say, it went badly because of this and this and this, and that wasn't all on me. So I think he has his reputation largely intact, and that gives him some options. One of them, the most lucrative option, if he's got his eyes on the bag, I do think it's just sticking around in the Premier League, because with the very, very solid work he did at Brentford, I think other sort of mid to lower half of the table clubs will look at him as a very safe pair of hands who will not get them relegated. So if someone like Palace, when Glasner leaves in the summer, you'll get a very good Premier League salary contract to stay in the most watched league in the world. That will undoubtedly be tempting for him. Also, probably wouldn't have to move either, being probably already based in London, so it's solid. But if he wants to further himself a little bit, and I do think when you've had a professional setback, it's not a bad idea to pivot a little bit and to seek a new challenge. Then there is a history, I think in particularly of the Bundesliga, of Danish coaches getting chances, getting some opportunities. But I like the idea of him going somewhere, because the big strike against him at Tottenham was that he couldn't organize the attack really, that the team couldn't play, that he was only focused on the defensive side of it. If I was him, I'd want to prove to the world that I can actually set up a team to go forward as well. And he did in the Championship with Brentford so it's kind of weird that it never got going at Spurs. But I would maybe look at some of these smaller leagues. Look at the Dutch league, one of the big clubs there. Look at one of the more powerful sides in the Belgian league. Look at a place where you would have, again, financially not a great direction, but he's just been paid a lot of money to go away by Spurs, so maybe he doesn't have to think about money for a while. But go somewhere where it's a very, very different challenge, and I do think he will have options.
The financial reality dictates he'll get another Premier League job next season. I think that is the open and shutness of it. But going into what Lars was saying, I think it would be really interesting, given that his only coaching experience is in Denmark and England, to step out of that would be really interesting. I think someone who's got a reputation as a good organizer like him, and someone who can fix a team defensively, which looked like it might come to pass in the opening couple of weeks at Spurs before the results went one way and the patience went quite quickly with it. I think you're never going to get pats on the back for setting up a team to defend in the Bundesliga. I think that's the issue, really. You look at Nico Kovac at Dortmund. No one's... I think most people have agreed he's done a good job there, but no one's queuing up to thrust flowers into his midriff, because the football's not really that sexy. So I guess that's a question. Then you're talking about something really culturally different, perhaps like Spain, and you're thinking there's only really a couple of clubs that could pay him over there. I think there's a clear conclusion to this, even though it would be interesting to see him going somewhere else.
Yeah, this question from Mia on X. After saying that Borussia Dortmund could challenge Bayern Munich for the title, why is Nico Schlotterbeck now rumoured to be leaving the club?
Well, this predates him saying that Dortmund were going for the title. There's been a question over Schlotterbeck's future for a while, given that he's out of contract in 2027, given that Dortmund, with that in mind, have been trying to extend him for quite a while. But, he's in the prime of his career, or will be entering the prime of his career as a defender. He's one of the best central defenders and in Europe. And he understandably wants to go and win some stuff. And he has every right to ask the question of, are Dortmund in the position to provide a platform for his ambitions? So him coming out and saying, look, we're not up for finishing second, we totally want to go and win this, that's completely in keeping with his thinking at the moment. Now, I guess there are a couple of things that have pushed him in the direction of more likely to stay. Not definitely staying, but more likely to stay in the last little while. Firstly, the fact that Dortmund have offered him an absolutely humongous salary, which is partly made possible by the fact that Niklas Süle, who they signed on an absolutely humongous salary on a free from Bayern going back 4 years, will be out of contract and won't be renewed in the summer. They're so desperate to build around Schlotterbeck that they have also offered him a release clause that will be valid from 2027, that will go down in price should they not make the Champions League in subsequent years. That they've never, since Goetze and being bitten by that, offered players release clauses. So this is them bending over backwards and then some to make sure that Schlotterbeck signs again. Now, they've been putting some subtle and not so subtle pressure on him publicly, the sporting director Sebastian Kehl, to sign again. Schlotterbeck himself says he wants it sorted out way before the World Cup. So it looks like his decision is going to be made by the March international break. So we're looking at just over a month as things stand. So they'll either work out that they're going to sell him in the summer, or that he's going to stay, and they can plan for next season. But what really works for Dortmund, I think, is the fact that what's going on at Real Madrid, because the other major contender to sign him going forward, if it's not Dortmund, it will be Real Madrid. They, of course, could pay the fee that they're looking for. If you bear in mind that Alaba's going at the end of the season, that Rudiger is possibly going at the end of the season, that Eder Militao's nowhere near fit. They need probably two centre halves, I would say, at least in the summer. So the issue is they haven't got a permanent manager at the moment, despite the not really saying whether he's permanent or not of Alvaro Arbeloa, as we were talking about an OTC last week. We know what the situation is with him, really. We know they'll try and look to get someone better in the summer. Now, if you're Schlotterbeck, obviously Real Madrid remain incredibly attractive. But I think you look at them and think, in what sort of a position are they to really offer him a certainty of trophies? They're not, with the way that Barcelona are at the moment, and with the way that Real Madrid are, not just in terms of on the bench and upstairs, but in terms of their squad, which is, a little bit half and half at the moment. They're not finished, I think it's fair to say, and there's at least a semi-rebuild to come. And also, you don't know who the next coach is. You're taking a big sort of leap of faith, really. So I feel that Dortmund are in a better position than they were 2 months ago to re-sign Nico Schlotterbeck.
I mean, he has incredibly strong cards. I mean, his agent is in a great position just because of the fact that the player that he is, because he's a centre half who's got good size, he's got solid physical presence. He's quick enough for his size as well. And he's pretty solid on the ball, and he's left-footed. Like that's a player profile that more or less every single club on the planet are looking for. Like a left-footed centre half who's physically good and can pass the ball. It's so good, and that of course means he can almost pick and choose, like Andy suggested. But I do think it's such an important deal for Dortmund to try to get him tied down, because whenever we talk about Dortmund and their failure to really challenge Bayern, it's not just about that model that they have of being a finishing school for elite talent. It's the fact that they haven't had enough good quality senior pros around those talents, and too much has been left on the shoulders of the developing players, and too many of the sort of prime mid-career, the guys who should be the building blocks of the team, have not been performing. Schlotterbeck does perform. He's one of the actual good ones in that bracket, and they don't have too many of them. So I completely see why they've decided to go big on the salary offer, bigger than they typically do. Because I do think, as much as Dortmund want I think the fact that they were as close as they were to going under before Klopp came in, I think that's still like a trauma that exists in the organization. I think they're hesitant to commit too much money to salaries because they still remember in living memory the club almost went under. But you do, the reality of, if you want to challenge Bayern, you're not just going to do it with teenagers. You're not. You are going to have to pick a couple of guys who you trust to pay superstar wages, even though you're Dortmund. And now, I mean, they are actually, because of Bayern's recent wobble, they are just 6 points behind. So if you're looking at it now, it doesn't feel like Bayern are this sort of team that can never be caught no matter what happens. So this seems to me as a time for them to really commit to this and to try to be a little bit ambitious. And being ambitious doesn't always mean throwing millions in the transfer market. It means actually rewarding the stars that you do have and enticing them to stay.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, really, isn't it, Lars? It's the reordering of the seniority in the Dortmund team and saying to Schlotterbeck, you are the guy that we want as our captain and want as one of our team leaders going forward. Because you look at some of the big guys that are going to be going. So, of course, you already had Pascal Gross go, but Emre Can will go in the summer. There's no doubt about that. You look at Zula. They're shedding a lot of big contracts. And so they're going to have money to spend because it's not just about getting money in through transfer fees, which is traditionally how we think of Dortmund doing business, but shedding some absolutely huge wages as well will give them latitude to get new players in. And to say that, you know, you're gonna be one of the guys who leads this team forward, and you know, whether it's Joe Bellingham, whoever else is going to be part of that leadership group going forward, I think it should excite you. It should excite you, and it should make you think that, you know, Niko Kovac has been such a good coach for them, because not only did he, in the short term, pull off a miracle and get them back in the Champions League this season, but he's made them more realistic, and he's made everyone around sort of knuckle down and do the basics a lot better. And Schlotterbeck, both in the future of them being like attractive still and exciting still, and doing the basics, I think you kind of got both angles covered there. So he's enormously important for them. I mean, it would be a huge boost to them if they could get him signed.
It's a typically classic Ask OTC question from John on email. Will Austria and Ralf Rangnick be successful in trying to get Carney Chukwuemeka to play for them instead of playing for England?
I think this is going to happen. And just to do the background with Chukwuemeka, born in Austria, moved to England when he was small, grew up in the English system. And look, the ability has been clear for a while through Villa, through Chelsea, and now at Dortmund. The thing that has stopped Chukwuemeka getting in the England team or the England squad, it's not even about the players ahead of him. I think it's about the ability to get him on the pitch on a consistent basis. Now, he's a guy who came on loan to Dortmund last season. Everyone loved him, loved what he could do. We're talking of making, as we were in the previous question, about making Dortmund young, athletically vigorous, all those sort of things. He's got real wit on the ball as well. But he's just not available often enough. So you got to a position where Dortmund were never going to pay the option that they had with Chelsea. They ended up buying him for a lower figure. The original figure was set at 40 million euros, and they ended up buying him for a touch under 25. And he's now started 6 Bundesliga games so far this season. And when he's played, he's been really good. There's nothing not to like about him. You know, he has got the athletic and technical possibilities to be a really good player for England. But the fact is, you have to ask at this point, is he just too far behind in terms of his peers getting ahead of him, in terms of other players getting ahead of him? And Ralf Rangnick is determined to get him on board. Now, if you're given the opportunity at 22 to play in the World Cup, and you look at England, and you look at the traffic ahead of you, and you look at the fact that, you know, you're not Jadon Sancho. You know, even Jadon Sancho, like it felt like his contributions in the Bundesliga weren't valued enough, even though he was fantastic, that he would have to come and prove it in the Premier League, which he's obviously struggled to do, before he was really valued as someone who should be someone who should play for England on a regular basis. If you're Chukwuemeka, you'd be thinking, I don't know about you, Lars, but you'd be thinking, what is your route really, realistically, to the England squad?
Yeah, and I think it kind of matters that he's playing in Germany as well now. Like, he has this Austrian heritage. To what extent that's something that's been a part of his upbringing or not, I'm not in a position to say. But let's say he's playing in England, having gone through the English academy system, and you get a phone call out of the blue from the Austrian FA, you might think, not sure about this. Or you might embrace that challenge, like someone like Matty Cash has done for Poland and really like gone into that. But it's different. But I just think when you've been in for 2 years now in the Bundesliga, you got Sabitzer, who's got 95 caps for Austria, as your teammate. Everyone knows who Ralf Rangnick is in this sort of an environment where you're operating in. You will have played against many of your potential teammates in the league. You probably already feel a certain proximity to it, at least more than you would have done if you've spent your entire life in England, I would imagine.
Jay on Blue Sky asks, why have Ajax decided to appoint Óscar García as the manager of their reserve team when they haven't even got a first team coach? Good question. Or an important question, I would have thought, Andy.
Yeah, it is an important question. And I think first we have to start out with why it's important for young Ajax, who have not been doing well this season, have a coach and have the right coach. Because I think, as Jay says in his question, like, you could argue, like, is not getting the first team sorted more important? I think you could argue that having young Ajax, the second team, on the right track is as important. Certainly historically, because clearly there are stronger generations and weaker generations. But when we bear in mind the long term, the history of Ajax, and then the relatively short term, the production of De Ligt, De Jong, and what they're producing now is not quite of the same level. I think that's a massive issue. And for Ajax, it's not just about being able to fill your first team, because that's the history of the club. For well over a decade now, they've had an eye on producing players so they can sell them to the Premier League. That has quite openly, they've discussed, and Brian Roy, who of course formerly of Nottingham Forest, who was in charge of young Ajax going back 10 years, Frank de Boer, they both spoke. Actually, I've interviewed both of them, and they spoke quite openly and honestly to me about, we need to produce players to sell to the Premier League. So we need players who are not just first team ready super quickly to replace the previous guys that we've sold, but also players with certain physical characteristics. Now, I think this is A, why you have a coach of substance, and B, why you have a coach with experience in England, as Óscar García has, of course, with Watford and Brighton, to look after young Ajax. I think that's incredibly important. The other part of it, of course, is there is this connection between Jordi Cruyff, the recently appointed sporting director of Ajax, who a lot of people will believe until proven otherwise that he was appointed because of his name, the connection between him and Óscar García, because they worked together in one of Jordi Cruyff's first front office jobs at Maccabi Tel Aviv. And in that season, it was a relatively short-term collaboration over one season, but they won the Israeli Premier League back for Maccabi for the first time in over 10 years. So they've worked together very well, and clearly Cruyff respects Garcia a lot. Now, if you look at Garcia's recent CV, I think you'll probably think his time as an elite level coach or a top level coach is top level coach is nearer the mark has been and gone. Clearly, he's had a few health issues as well, as we know, but he is someone that over time has been good at shaping and moulding young players as well. So I think you look at his time in charge of Red Bull Salzburg, for example, and his role in moulding young talents there. And, young talents were the future of the club, just as they should be for Ajax, really, because we know what the Red Bull model is. And you could argue it's a slightly more modern version of what Ajax and Barcelona have been doing for the best part of 50 years. So I think when you look at what Cruyff is trying to do at Ajax, trying to make them structurally strong, institutionally strong, this is one of the first things to get right. Because if you can get Óscar García in post, and of course he's not going to produce anyone in 6 months, we're looking more at like 3, 4, 5, 6 years, really. To get the club all rowing in the same direction is the most important thing. Where they've really lacked since Van der Sar went and Overmars went for, completely correct reasons, that they have been institutionally weak. And that is something that Jordi Cruyff is in the best possible position to try and fix. His job will stand and fall on not whether Ajax get into the Champions League this season, because clearly they're not going to win the Eredivisie, but on what they're able to do in the coming years, on the players they produce, on the players they can produce for the first team, on the players they can sell going forward. All of those things will decide whether Jordi Cruyff has been the guy or not. In terms of like a first team coach, that's something they can figure out for next season when they're having a proper push to try and win the Eredivisie back, because they're absolutely miles behind PSV at the moment. I think you wait to see in summer, you'll have a better choice of candidates for the first team coach's job. And as well, you'll know where PSV are at, because we know that Peter Bosz has extended. So for me, that makes it quite complicated to catch up with PSV in the short or even medium term. But of course, we don't know what sort of squad they're going to have next season. Will Perisic still be there? Will Ismail Saibari still be there? Will some of the other players still be there? Look, we know there are a couple of big sales from most Eredivisie clubs next season, but you have a better idea of the task ahead, I think, when you're 4 months ahead of where they are now.
Do you, Andy, think if you're Jordi Cruyff, you've been put into this job, you have a very difficult rebuilding job ahead of you with Ajax, you have a head coach who you like, who you've been successful with, and it was very early in Jordi Cruyff's career, really, as a sporting director, wasn't it? It was only like his second gig or something that he hired him, and they won the league. And that's one of he's not had too many like glorious moments of triumph in his coaching or managerial career, Jordi Cruyff. So you probably have a very strong feeling for this guy. Let's assume they got to get on well privately as well. You have this head coach. Because of his recent track record and profile, you probably can't sell the board on hiring him as your new head coach. You're probably not going to be able to get that through. But you can make
He's saying it's like a soft launch.
But you can make him the youth team coach. You can get him in the building, and if he does a good job with the youth team for a period, then you'll always have that as like an option. Maybe not already this summer, but you make one appointment in the summer. If that doesn't work out, like, hey, we've got this youth. I like him. He's good. He's nice. Is the way you kind of sneak him in? Is you think there's something there?
Yeah, I don't think that's off the table at all. I think you could have a really good point there, and it's funny. I sort of think about that a little bit. We were talking in yesterday's show about Thomas Frank and Spurs. It would not stun me if John Heitinga becomes the next Spurs coach, at least for the rest of this season. Maybe he fills time ahead of Pochettino. And if you appoint him directly after like he gets sacked from Ajax, where he has a terrible first half of season, going back to Ajax, that's a really difficult sell. Whereas if you, as you say, soft launch him, as help to Thomas Frank, because of the influence that he had at Liverpool last season, you can almost forget the Ajax bit. You're washing that bit away by like putting him in the coaching staff and going, oh, he did a really good job in this exact role for Liverpool last season. They won the Premier League, And then maybe you put it in through that filter rather than walking him through the front door.
Are the Spurs fans ready to accept a head coach who's only been a head coach once and then he was like chased out of the building having set everything on fire? I'm not sure. But we're coming at it from a low bar now.
Now, it won't have escaped your notice that Ask OTC on this edition is going out on a Valentine's Eve.
Ooh.
So it's unsurprising that Bernardo on X has got a question with that as a theme. And Bernardo's question is, why do fools fall in love? Sorry, I don't know what happened there. It's a senior moment. His question is, as we approach Valentine's Day, what's the most romantic stadium to visit in European football? I don't think this is a bad question.
It's a great question. I really like it.
Yeah, because sometimes you have to convince your other half, no, honestly, you're going to enjoy this. No, honestly, you're going to enjoy this. No, honestly, you're going to enjoy this. So, Lars, what are we going to enjoy from your perspective, first of all?
I mean, honestly, the first two things that came to mind were actually two Italian arenas. I've always had a notion at taking a girlfriend to the Artemio Franchi to see Fiorentina would work, because it's not the most aesthetically pleasing stadium in the world. They have a running track, yada yada yada, but you can kind of sit there and you can kind of see the Tuscan hills in the background, and you're in Florence. So whatever happens before and after the game, you can make that really good. Team plays in purple. That's nice. And I also think, in a slightly similar vein, I do think Bologna, the Stadio Dallara, is with its old sort of brick tower, and again there you have some lovely hillsides in the background, and you're in a beautiful, very good food city. So I think both a Fiorentina game and a Bologna game is kind of low-key, not bucket list stadiums maybe for the football connoisseur, but something that combines well with the city break, I think, with the loved ones. Just kind of throw in a completely rogue option. Do you actually think Besiktas is an interesting here? Because I do think Istanbul as a romantic city break is very good. It's a very beautiful city. And if you can afford it, if you can get a room at one of there's a couple of really nice high-end hotels that literally overlooks Besiktas Stadium. The
Swiss Hotel.
The Swiss Hotel in particular. Like, the lobby in the Swiss Hotel is extraordinary. It has the sort of old world hotel feel. I think they even have a couple of shops down there inside, which I feel like used to be a thing in hotels in the past, that they would have like hotel shops.
Very much in Turkish hotels, yeah.
Yes, the Swiss Hotel overlooking the Besiktas. I mean, if you can afford it, it's a pricey place, but that will definitely impress. And then you can go to the football at Besiktas, kind of overlooking the Bosphorus there. I mean, that is a good romantic city break as well.
I guess that's the thing. Like, it's so beautifully positioned, the Besiktas Stadium, isn't it? The fact that it's right on the Bosphorus, next to the Dolmabahce Palace, and then when there's this massive roar as they concede a goal at home to Karagümrük and they start whistling and jeering, you turn around to your beloved and go, "This is the extent of my passion for you." That's clearly the vibe, isn't it? In terms of stadium, Dotun, I was going to go for Braga, actually, because, of course, everyone knows Braga is a really unique stadium. The quarry, it cost most of the construction cost when it was like done up ahead of Euro 2004 was actually digging out the rock, because it was an old quarry. So you have a main stand on either side and nothing behind either goals in terms of spectator accommodation. But you have a hill on one side and what looks more like a cliff face on the other. So I can imagine you, for example, Dotun, abseiling down the cliff face, all in black with a box of black magic under your arm to your beloved from the walkway. I think that could be the
lady loves it. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
She loves to see me dressed in black. Following up from that question, Robert in LA asks, what club would you ask to be your Valentines this year? So we've got the stadium, Andy. What's the club?
You see, Lars kind of went ahead with the first one, and funnily enough, when he was talking about Fiorentina, they were in my mind for this question already, because the purple, of course. I mean, in terms of the stadium, it's kind of, I think it's quite a difficult sell at the moment, because of course it's under a major period of reconstruction, although you can stay there and sit there and say to your partner, look what I'm building for our future, etc., etc., etc. But I think what is more romantic than escape from danger, really. And you look where Fiorentina are in the table at the moment, not just a beautiful city, a historic city and venue and club in Florence and Fiorentina, but the fact that you could escape from the danger of relegation to Serie B, that does it for me.
And for you, Lars?
I think it's Como. I think that's a very romantic. I mean, if you could ask a club to be your Valentine, Como is an inherently romantic location. The club itself is exciting right now, kind of up and coming with a clear, defined style of play. A very sort of a very romantic character, I think, as their manager. I think Pep Fabregas is quite a romantic character, as you know. I thought the way he spoke to the players before the shootout against Napoli was very beautiful. He said, enjoy because it's the first of many. Very good, very romantic character. I think Como definitely. Good answer to this. I'm stuck. I think this should be honestly a regular segment on OTC. Maybe not every episode, but once a month. Recommend a good city break for you and the missus where you can weave in the football without it being too much of an annoyance to your partner. We should do this more often. It's so good. It's such a good idea.
I've got a better idea because it's time for our game of the week. And each week we recommend a game for you to watch at the weekend. And just as importantly, we also suggest the food that you should be having with it. Andy, what are you going for this week?
I've gone for Sunday at 3:15 p.m. UK time, the Madrid derby between Rayo and Atletico Madrid. Now, Atletico, of course, are in an interesting sort of situation at the moment. Where will they go from here? More questions over Diego Simeone and how long he will keep going in the Madrid press this week after the home defeat to Betis last week that sort of played them out of any even slight contention for the title in La Liga. So they have to work out what they can do with the rest of this season. Still Champions League to play for, of course. But yeah, there are questions here. And I think in this context, an away derby at one of the most ramshackle grounds in La Liga is a really interesting one. Now, it's not just the ground that's ramshackle, and that's always been a part of Rayo's charm. In the neighbourhood of Vallecas, a really fascinating oldie worldy sort of club, really, with this three-sided stadium, with the fact that you can't buy a ticket or a shirt on the internet. You have to queue up outside the ground. It's amazing that still exists in 2026.
Are they actually online?
There is a website, but I mean, it's not really good for anything. So really, that's quite charming, but it's sort of tipped too far the other way, really, because they weren't able to play against Oviedo last weekend because their pitch was in such a state it was deemed not acceptable for top level football. So we're assuming that this is going to go ahead, and the new pitches managed to bed in. Also, the players have called out their very controversial president Raul Martin Presa over the last little while for not having facilities, like changing facilities at the stadium. Again, worthy of a professional club, as some of their players have put it. So, they've been on a really bad run of form, which has seen them, despite the fact they played really well at the Bernabeu and only lost to a 99th minute penalty the other week to Kylian Mbappe. They're in a real bind at the bottom of the league, so they really need this. Atletico really need to pick up to relieve some of the pressure and get a good run together. So there's a lot riding on this. Now, as Vallecas is a very working class neighbourhood of Madrid, we're going to go quite simple tapas. So we're talking calamares, albondigas, meatballs, boquerones, and of course, patatas bravas.
Yeah, can't do it without the patatas bravas, can we?
No.
So that's Rayo Vallecano versus Atletico Madrid, Sunday at 3:15 p.m. What are you going for, Lars?
I'm heading to Italy, having just with this quite Italy-centric sort of end to the show here with me, with my sort of romantic choices for the game as well. But no, for the game of the week, I'm going Inter versus Juventus because as we discussed on the main show, there could be a title. I mean, Inter they're 8 points ahead of Milan, they're 9 points ahead of Napoli. It looks like they're going to cruise, but you know what? If you look at Inter's remaining fixtures, they've got this game against Juventus at the weekend now, big derby. Then they got Lecce and Genoa. Okay, it should be easy enough. But in March, they run into a run of, they've got the derby against Milan. Then they host Atalanta, could be tricky. Then they go away to Fiorentina, not the hardest game in the world, but And then they've got Roma at home and then Como away. So the sort of March-April run, there's some banana skins there. So if Juventus, who have been improving under Spalletti, slightly disappointing draw against Lazio maybe, and the defeat to Cagliari wasn't good, but there have been signs of life there under Spalletti. If Spalletti can get something out of this with Juventus, and of course for him, as you know, he was fired by Inter, one of the many clubs he's been fired from at some point back in 2019. He'll be on the hunt for revenge there, I'm sure. If he can get something out of them, and maybe, let's say, Milan gets something out of the derby, then suddenly it's not beyond the realms of possibility that we might have a title race here. So, as much as it makes me feel unclean, I'll be sitting down watching this, rooting. I'm all in for Juventus, baby. For once, evil must triumph, so that we can have some. I suppose evil, when sooner or later you become the anti-hero, in a sort of charming way. So yeah, we want Juventus, who possibly playing a bit more interesting football under Spalletti than they were in the past, to get something against Inter this weekend. I did think, since we're in Milan and it's winter, we got to get something like quite hearty, which of course Milanese cuisine is very much. Let's do the cotoletta alla Milanese. Let's do the breaded veal cutlet. No messing about. Good hearty breaded meat.
So that's Inter versus Juventus. It's on Saturday at 7:45. And thank you both. Yeah, both, I think, interesting recommendations. I'm probably going to watch them both.